Cue motivational music. Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name's Dean and I'm a designer on a quest to further understand the creative industry and learn as much as this noggin will hold. Join me as I share my discoveries and tap into the minds of some of the most well-respected creatives in the world. This is my creative therapy. Hello and welcome to episode 8. So today I'm joined by Diane Young, who is the co-founder of The Drum. Definitely didn't mean for that to rhyme. The Drum is a global media platform and is actually the biggest marketing website in Europe. I'm sure many of you are familiar with their publications, but in addition to the website and magazine, they provide award shows, live events, marketing solutions, video production, research, the list goes on. Definitely check them out if you haven't already. And in this episode, Diane and I talk about her journey within the industry, how brands are transitioning into disruptive spaces, social media influencers, her TED Talk, and loads more. So, where are you at the minute? Are you in Scotland?
I live in London. I've lived in London for 5 years.
Ah, okay. I shouldn't just assume from the accent. So, yeah, massive thanks for being on the podcast. I really appreciate your time and you being here.
Oh yeah, where do you host your content?
So I've got it on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube at the minute, and with the hope of putting it out to more sort of platforms in the future. Mm-hmm. So it's fairly new, to be honest. I've recorded around about 20 podcasts, but only 6 are live at the minute. So the latest one was I did one with a guy called James Cross, who's the creative director of the BBC. He was the latest one that I put out. That was episode 6. So I'm putting one out every week, and just going from there, really. And
yeah. And how's the audience going? I'm just interested in podcasting.
No, it's going really well. Surprisingly, really well. What I wanted to do, I wanted to get a bit of weight behind the podcast first before I started talking about it and shouting about it and stuff. So I got 5 episodes in, or 5 episodes, and then thought it's probably a good time to maybe push it out there. So I did. I haven't done any sort of paid advertising for it at the minute or anything, but just I think podcasts in general are just it's a form of entertainment which is just going through the roof at the minute. Although they've been around for years, but it just seems within the last year or two. I've seen an interesting stat from a guy who works at a company called Social Chain, who said that in 2020 he predicts that 50% of brands are going to be using podcasts. Yeah, it feels like a reinvented form of audio entertainment. Obviously, you've got the radio, but I think with most people, it's kind of hit and miss whether or not they actually enjoy listening to it.
Yeah. Well, it's much more driven by the user, which is good. I mean, I can't stand radio presenters. I think I'm just too old. I like the music, but I don't like the bits in between. I don't find it entertaining. I find it irritating. So, to be able to listen to something that you've chosen is really good. So, anyway, but maybe we'll talk about some of those trends when we're actually in our interview.
Yeah, totally. So, I would love to hear about your journey and where you started. You studied maths at, was it Strathclyde?
I did indeed, yes. I never, when I was at school, thought that I would go to university and study maths. But there you go. You end up doing strange things. Yes.
Fair play, no. So you, what was the sort of the transition between wanting to study maths and wanting to? Because I know you worked at the NHS as well. What was it that sort of? How did you go from studying maths to then working at the NHS to then working at the Drum?
Yeah. Well, when I graduated, I couldn't get a job for a while, and then I ended up in the NHS doing a statistics-related job, doing health stats. And I moved on through various jobs over 5 years in the health service. And by that time, I had met my husband, Gordon, who ran a company called Scott Media, and he eventually asked me if I would come and join the business to do events, because publishing companies were starting to do events. And so that's what I did. I was part-time. I worked in the mornings in the health service in community and mental health, and in the afternoon in the media industry. And I actually went and worked for the company for nothing for 6 months until eventually I said, look, I'd quite like to leave my job and do this full time. So please, could you give me some money? Which they did. He and the other business partner that we have, Nick. So I went to work with Gordon and Nick and started doing events. And then after a short time, it became apparent that the business needed an MD. And so it was agreed that I would take on that role. So I was about 28 or something at the time, no experience in running a company or even working in a commercial company. And that was me thrown into this role. So yeah, I didn't really have any relevant experience whatsoever, which was probably not that good for the business for the next few years. But the story moved on. We figured a few things out and started to get a business education, and that to take off.
Yeah, I've been a massive massive fan of the drum for ages, and I love what you guys are doing. It's a really interesting platform. There's loads of different options to, you could spend all day on there just getting inspired.
Please
And
do.
no, I love it. I seriously do. And you mentioned you sort of went into the drum and not getting paid and stuff, and it reminded me, I think you mentioned it in the TED talk that you did, which, and I think it was called Why It Takes 25 Years to Become an Overnight Success.
That's right, yeah.
It really, to me, it communicated that you should never really give up on an idea, and if you feel like things aren't working, you should look for reasons why, and don't be afraid to question if there's anything you're doing wrong.
Mm-hmm. I think if you've got an idea that you're passionate about and you're maybe struggling with it, then something that really, really helps is to make connections with people who are already doing similar things or have relevant experience. And mostly when you reach out to people, they help. They want to help other people. They want to share their experience and try to help people not to maybe make the same mistakes. So I think there's always someone out there who's going to help you and support you, and I think that's really important to help you keep going, but also to help you not make silly mistakes. It might be that you've got a great idea, but you're missing something fundamental, and so it's so important to try and get help from other people, to read books and to get an education for yourself, but find a support network as well. It's incredible the power of a good support group around you, whether that's formal, and I'm part of a formal group like that, and informal as well, just people that you can phone up when you're feeling like you can't move things forward yourself any further. So yeah, I think tenacity is really important, and belief, and the ability to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's kind of like there's so many. It's never really been easier in today's world to sort of start a business, and there's so much inspiration around you, and there's so many different areas of business to get into, especially in the online space, just for social media, for example, where you've got influencers who, I guess, in there's definitely some business model behind being a influencer. Do you think over time, the more influencers that we sort of see on Instagram as a means of promoting a business, do you think that the influencer model would become sort of more diluted as it expands? Because obviously, in my opinion, the more influencers that you have, the less effective they kind of are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think it's the same as most things in the world, that there's going to be people who manage to streak ahead and become massively influential. I actually saw Mylene Klass being interviewed last week at an event, and the way that she approaches using her celebrity status earned through her pop career to make money now, and to carve out doing more of what she wants, which is not necessarily pop music at all. It was a really good story about how someone has taken some influence and really worked hard to monetize it and to make it a proper career. And I think there's probably a a misconception that people just shoot to stardom, and then they make loads of money out of it, and they just kind of roll out of the bed in the morning and count their money.
Hmm.
But behind every single one of those success stories, there is someone absolutely grafting, or maybe like Myling Class, thinking really carefully about what their sweet spot is in terms of audience and how they can make that a career for themselves. I was amazed how much she talked about data, for instance. You just look at her as a member of the public and think, oh, pop
Yeah.
star, celebrity, makeup, clothes, fancy gigs and everything. She's all about the data. So that was really interesting. So I think the answer to your question is there's going to be a lot of people who think they can do it without much effort, but they're wrong. And you're right, it's going to get more and more competitive. Uh, but you're also right in that it's never been easier before. So a few years ago, you wouldn't be talking to me because you wouldn't be having a podcast. You wouldn't be trying to make your
Hmm.
mark. And secondly, I would either be stuck in Scotland in a pretty dismal business or be out of business. But the internet came along, and we were able to make our mark in the world and become a globalized business. So the opportunity is there like it's never been before in the history of time. So if people want to grasp that opportunity, they just need to put in the work. Um, work will always overcome. I think unless your idea is fundamentally not good. But if you've got one idea like that, think of another one and go for your next idea.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
true.
What's your
And
what's your what's your ambition for your podcast? Because
um,
I know it's not your full-time job.
no, no. I mean, if I could make it my full time job where I get to speak like to people like you all day, that would be incredible. Um, but there is no sort of. I mean, I was speaking to a couple of guys last week, and they were saying, you can monetize podcasts and stuff, but as as good as that sounds, at the same time, it sort of takes away the value of it. Like I've seen a few podcasts on YouTube where they begin their podcasts by saying, "Oh, and this podcast is sponsored by so and so," and it's kind of it loses something, and it feels a bit cheap. And I'm
Mhm. I'll tell you what I think. I think good on you. You've monetized your podcast. You're creating
mm,
something of value and you're making value in your life from it. So I actually have the opposite view from that. Two of my
mhm.
favorite podcasts are, excuse me, the Oprah Winfrey series, which if you haven't listened to that, it's incredible. Um, and that's sponsored. And the other one is the chap that started LinkedIn. Um,
Oh, okay.
and his is sponsored. In fact, I can tell you it's a life insurance uh, um, search engine or service that sponsors
Mm,
his podcast. So I've listened to so many, I actually know what it is. And the way that they do it is quite neat.
mhm.
They make a little bit of interesting content out of what the sponsor does. And so it's not too intrusive. So that's two like massive names, one in the world of entertainment and business, one in the world of business, uh, who are producing amazing content that I appreciate, and I'm perfectly happy to listen to the sponsor's message as a result. So why would you know, if you want to do what you're doing full time, you're going to have to think of a way of, living without
Absolutely.
without a salary. So I'm not sure that's the right mindset for you to have. I
I
think the
know.
mindset is how do I do this in a way that I can achieve my ambition of doing it full time, but which still creates a quality experience for the listeners.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if that was the case, and if I were able to do that, that would be amazing. I guess I haven't really researched into it enough and how to monetize it or anything. I think at this stage, it's kind of more of a hobby and just something that I look forward to do. Um, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and if there was a way where I could sort of tie in, if it was related, like if, for instance, this podcast was sponsored by the drum,
Hmm.
you could kind of get away with it. But if it was sponsored by teeth whitener, it would I don't know. I'm not sure whether it would feel right because I don't know. Again, I haven't looked into it as much, but it's definitely something that I probably would consider if it got to the
Mm.
stage where I seen an opportunity where I could take it full time, I would love to. Jesus Christ, yeah,
Yeah,
that would be a
yeah.
dream.
I mean, even
But
even if it's a your side chisel,
mm,
why not make money for yourself from it? My One of my main hobbies is I love renovating properties, dismal properties, and making them into nice places to live. But that probably constitutes about 25% of our household income. So I get to
wow,
do
okay.
something that I love, and it helps us to have a nice life for our family.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean, if you can take a hobby and you're good at something and you can do it for a living, then that's the dream,
yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely. Why not? And I think that as time goes on, it will more and more be the case that people of your age will have multiple streams of income. You'll have your kind of major-ish job, but you'll also have one or two or three other things that you do because there's so many opportunities. People can be selling things on eBay or uh, making their craft hobby into something that they can make money out through selling through, the multiple sites that are out there, full of people wanting to buy those kinds of things. And also, like the kind of thing that you're doing, you're creating value for people by bringing relevant content to them that will help them. So I can see a time when you know I have a single job and a single income is very much a thing of the past for a huge proportion of the population. And as things like artificial intelligence come in, I think that people will need to look for lots of different ways of making the life that they want for themselves.
Mm.
So I think it's everything to play for, and I think it's really interesting. And
Yeah,
I would love, schools to be much more interested in getting entrepreneurial mindsets into the kids, rather than necessarily uh, some of the things that my children are learning at school.
yeah, that's so true. I was speaking to someone the other day as well, and we were talking about education and how everything in the last 100 years, if you look at everything, it's changed within the last 100 years. But education is one that hasn't really been touched. It's still everyone gets into a classroom, looks at one person at the front of the room, and they listen to that person for an hour. Then they move into the next lesson, then the next, and it's kind of like, yeah, like you say about this whole entrepreneurial thing, it'd be great to learn some like entrepreneurial lessons and just learn what life is like on the outside, as well as the subjects that can help in it.
Hmm.
I think, and yeah, when I was speaking to James Cross, we were saying that a lot of uh, kids, well, I say kids, to be asked at 16 years old what you want to do for the rest of your life, it's a heavy question to be asked, and it's one that I didn't really benefit from because I was studying graphic design and art and music, and I just chose the subjects that I enjoyed doing when I was in school. And when I was there, there was no real. I wasn't really told that I could make an income or live a sustainable life off these hobbies. It was kind of like when I was studying graphic design, for example. I remember this one project we had to design a DVD cover or something, and but that was it. They just told us how to make it. They didn't teach us how to sell it or how to communicate it to a certain audience, or anything about the marketing side of things. And I guess I might have been a bit naive, um, to be fair, but it kind of felt like that's that might have been the reason why I wasn't sure that there was an actual way for me to get into the industry and actually get paid for doing what I enjoyed doing.
I mean, I think that's absolutely right, and I think that teachers and career libraries are they live in a different kind of world. There's not enough connection. I remember doing a little quiz thing when I was at university and I was in my fourth year. Yeah, it must have been coming up to the milk round, and you would put into the career system what you liked and what you didn't in these questions. And my top job that came up was to be a minister, as in of the church. I mean, I'm an atheist, so I don't know how the heck that happened, but that was a kind of level of intuition about what careers you could have at that point. But I think there's a movement now amongst business owners and entrepreneurs. I'm not so much in the corporate world for this, but and there are several organisations starting up to really have a push to to make an impact on the problem that you've just discussed. So there are organisations like Youth Enterprise where school kids are encouraged to start a business and run it for a year, make a profit, and there's a national competition. I'm involved with an organisation called Founders for Schools, where you go in and when there's a careers day, they will provide 3 to 4 entrepreneurs to talk about how they got into their business and what they do. But it's still not enough. I think it's still not enough. Um, and I worry about the exams. I've got children coming up to the exam time in their life, and my son's just not interested at all. He wants to be an e-gamer. Uh,
Right.
I don't know whether that's a proper career or not. I mean, I kind of know that lots of people are making money out of it, but I worry about whether that's like saying I'm going to be a professional footballer. It's so hard to get to the stage where you're earning a living out of it. That even I'm still saying to my son, "You've got to study for your exams. You've got to have a plan B." That's the game. The game at the moment is played in a way that the points that are on the scoreboard is what exam results you get, and I don't know when that's going to change. But equally, yesterday I was sort of counselling one of our young employees who wants to leave and go to university, and I'm saying, well, you're in a brilliant position now. You've got a job. You could get training. You could do part-time education. Why not do that instead of going and coming out with a 45 grand debt? Why don't you come out, having earned 45 grand or more, so you could make a 90 to 100,000 pound difference in your financial situation in your life. Is it the right thing to go to university and do a degree just because you feel you need one? And I think employers need to look at how they are recruiting young people as well. You know, should we be doing more in-house training and focusing more on apprenticeships and less on, making sure that we're recruiting graduates? I think the whole landscape is in a little bit of flux in
Mm.
terms of how careers happen. And I think it's really exciting. I think it's much more exciting than when I graduated. You had to go to university if you wanted a decent job. That was it. It was very black or white then, and I don't think it's as black or white now. Whether that means I'm going to let my son play on his computer 24 hours a day, I don't know. I don't think so.
No,
um,
you're totally right. It almost feels like, from my point of view, you're obliged to live this kind of well, it's not so much it wasn't so much a fairy tale lifestyle back in the day. It was just the way things were done. But now you still feel as though you're on this path where you go to school, you leave school, you go to college, you leave college, go to uni, you leave college, uni, have kids, get married, move into a house, and that's sort of like the way you're pushed in and out of education, I guess. And I can see it's the transition of that just doesn't feel kind of natural, and I think the system is fully aware of it, but they're just not sure how to tackle it because it's something that's been done for so long. How do they go about switching things up? And it's not an overnight thing by any sort of stretch of the imagination, but it's just not something that can be done easily. And I don't know whether that sounds like I'm saying it's too hard, so that's why they're not doing it. But
mm. Well, there's a lot of
it's
entrenched views and also vested interests as well. Um, that universities are there to sell now as well. They don't get funding automatically. They have to sell what they're doing. Um, and I think the way they're going about it is by saying, it's so important to have a degree. You won't be able to get a proper job if you don't have a degree. And I think that's not really believable anymore. Um, I think there's some areas where, if you've got relevant experience, which you can gain by, just contact companies and say, can I come in and work in your office for a week or 2 weeks, or 4 hours a week for 2 months or something, find out about the jobs that you might like. When I'm looking at CVs, I value that almost as much, really, if not the same as a degree. Somebody has said, I've spent time working out what I might want to do. I've tried different things, and when I got into this, I really, really liked it. So now I know that's what I want to work in, um, and I think it's almost better to do that really early, um, and show that you've got some gumption. To me, gumption, applying yourself, doing something risky or that you were scared to do, but you did it anyway. Those things are so valuable when you're recruiting people, and I think
Yeah,
they're probably undervalued. And even the way that a CV works hasn't changed in what 30. Well, when did I graduate? 1991. The CVs I get are the exact same format as what I was doing all those years ago. Surely something in the world would move on. Why don't people, you know, record a mini podcast series and submit that as their CV, or do a video of themselves, or do a little documentary about um, something that they're passionate about. If somebody sent me something like that saying, "Here's something that I've thought about in your industry and I'd love to work in your company," I'd be blown away by that. But amazingly, people still send a CV saying, that it's obviously not even personalised. And funny
yeah.
enough, uh, you know, uh, uh, if somebody makes a real effort, then I make an effort to reply. But if it's just something that's coming off the cuff and they've obviously just done copy and paste, I'm not going to answer that, and they're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I would kind of like to think that it's slightly different in the creative industry,
It's
just
not.
because no,
No.
not at all.
No. Well,
Because
we're in the creative industry. We're in the media.
yeah, I
Um,
know it's a shame to sort of. It's kind of ironic that you're in a creative industry and you're selling yourself on an A4 bit of paper. It's
yeah.
kind of it's strange, but I think I talked about them earlier. Social Chain, they had an application once, and their application form was basically a Lego building of their interior
That's
office,
brilliant. Hmm.
and it had everything from the blue slide in the office to uh, the MD and all the other characters and stuff.
Hmm.
And in the middle was just the USB of the portfolio or something like that. But
Well, surely
it's
you would think it would, yeah, have a little extra person that they didn't recognise. Who's that? Oh, that's me. Yeah, I mean, I've seen there are some brilliant ones done. I know that. I mean, there was. Do you know the Fearless Girl statue? Um, it was in New
no,
York at the bottom Broadway outside our office for a while, and it's a bronze statue of a young girl standing in front of the charging bull at the bottom Broadway. And it
okay,
received a lot of media attention. It was done as a promotion by, I think, McCann's. Anyway, what a candidate for a role basically did that thing where you cover these people that do the statues for tourists. They cover themselves in spray paint and they
oh
stand
yeah,
still.
yeah,
Those things, yeah, basically made themselves up as the fearless girl and stood outside the office of the agency that she wanted to work for. And so those, they do happen, but I don't
that's
understand
awesome.
why more people aren't doing that even for not creative jobs. Just do something that shows your passion, and that really, really will capture the attention. Um,
But again, that might fall into the hands of the people who work in education, because at the end of the day, those are the guys who are sort of releasing their students out into the big world. If that, I guess they should be the ones saying, you need to brand yourself and you need to really sell yourself when you leave. You don't just be handing out A4 CVs.
yeah, yeah.
But it's there was another application. I can't remember who it was for or where I've seen it, but someone had wrapped a USB around I don't know whether it was basically an owl. I think it was an owl or some sort of bird, and they wrapped the USB around the foot of the bird, and they sent it through the window of the office,
Wow.
and it landed on someone's shoulder or something. It sounds made up. It sounds like something in a
Yeah.
film, but
Some
I'll have to
people are quite
Google it.
scared of birds. I wouldn't like a bird landing on my shoulder, I don't think. If you've ever had
Yeah,
a
if you
pipe
had
came down your chimney and got stuck in your house, as I have, it's pretty. The bird gets very panicky. It's not. So I'm not sure that's quite risky. Um,
yeah, that's true. And then you got to worry about other things if birds start flying around in the office.
yeah, I think
That's true.
one of the things that I wish I'd thought about in my career was that somebody once said to me, or I wrote, "Oh yeah, well you're the managing director of yourself," and I don't think people necessarily think of themselves as their own mini business, but they are, or
Mm.
they should. So, what's in a business? What is it that the business does? What does it produce? How does it service its customers? How does it market itself? How does it get paid? Um, so if you think of yourself as a mini business, then I think that would, a business would never send out something like a CV, as a marketing promotion, or well, maybe they would, but I don't think it would get them very far, because nobody's really that interested in the history of a business. They're interested in what can that business do for me? How can it help me in my private life or in my business life? And I think everything that you need to do that exists now. You can have your own channels, you can have your own brand personality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's this fear or lack of confidence some people have when they're promoting themselves, and I think there's also a worry that getting shut down and not getting the response they want is going to further damage their confidence, when in fact it's probably going to do the opposite, long term, if you look at sort of self-building and stuff. But I guess again it comes down to risks, and like you mentioned in your TED talk, not being afraid to question if it's something that you're doing wrong too. And I can see a similar thing playing out in brands as
Okay, for
well.
time just
And I'd
now.
love to get your thoughts on this. So it kind of sits in line with what we were just saying, and the whole transition between traditional and what's going on now. And what I'm finding really interesting to watch at the minute is brands sort of transitioning from sort of traditional forms of marketing and advertising to this unfamiliar space and online space. And I've seen a stat from Hootsuite, which said social media ad spend in 2019 is expected to be nearly 93 billion. And I'm guessing a lot of sort of traditional media relies on ad revenue to sustain their platforms. Are there any sort of considerations you think these brands should be thinking about?
Media brands specifically.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what we think about all the time. That's my job, is to think
Mm.
about that all the time for our company. And I think it's about 10 years ago, we set off with a short list of things we needed to do to transform our company, and one of them was reduce our dependence on print advertising, which at that point was about 45% of our revenue,
Wow.
on turnover of under £2 million. We now turn over 7 million, and it's less than 10% of our revenue. So it is still there, but now we're looking at uh, a decline in digital advertising as well. So everything we've been doing in
Okay.
our business over the last number of years has been re-engineering it to be not dependent on advertising revenue anymore, and I think that opens up a whole um, vista of opportunity. So we have in our company, we have several membership models. We do branded content. We have a lot of events. We're now much more focused on monetizing the content that we do, that we produce, which up until now has been mainly free to access, which kind of brings us back round to where we started in our conversation earlier about whether podcasts should be monetized or not. Um, so subscription models are important, affiliate revenue, licensing, creating a marketplace where other people can exchange services and we get some sort of compensation for that. All of these things are ways that media companies uh, can basically make up for the fact that advertising revenue is going to become increasingly difficult. But I firmly believe that well, we're in B2B media. I firmly believe that B2B media has got a massive role to play in business, and it always will. And what is really important is that the companies that own the platforms and have created audience and have massive expertise in an area, that they've got to focus really hard on how they can maintain their position, maintain a healthy business. And that's, as I say, what I spend most of my time thinking about in our business. But it's really exciting because there's no lack of opportunity or ideas. It's just reorganizing and re-engineering your organization to be able to take advantage of those ideas. Um,
That's really interesting.
yeah, there's all sorts of models as well that we're not actually using at the moment. Things like lead generation. Um, some companies like Hearst are doing really interesting things in the B2B space. Hearst Health has become an organization that I saw the CEO speak. He said they were going to make $1 billion profit, and it's all around providing data and decision-making power to healthcare organizations in the States, which grew out of their model of being publishers of health magazines. But now they barely publish at all in the way that they used to. But it's all around systems that are embedded into hospitals and health insurance companies. So there's all sorts of interesting models and all sorts of opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess it's part of the brand's responsibility, or the organization's responsibility, to be a bit risky with things, and sort of not jump at chances, but just take opportunities and take risks, and not be afraid of the unknown. And like if something come along, like a new platform, I'm looking at it kind of like from if sort of like a traditional organization was to sort of approach the drum, how they can adapt in this online space without alienating their existing audience.
Yeah, and I think we've gone through a phase where it's been realised that really intrusive advertising that's going to wreck the experience of your users on your site is not the way to go. Clickbait, not fake news, because proper publishers haven't gone down that route. But the experience that people have with you is really, really important. But people are prepared to pay for good content delivered in a way that suits their changing habits. And I think that certain big innovations in media have, seismically changed the way that people consume things. So Spotify for music, and Netflix and Amazon Prime for TV and video, YouTube for video. Twitch is an amazing organization that's just it's basically like YouTube, but it's live streaming, so people can get involved with the people that are streaming as they are streaming. So I think there's a massive change in the habitual way that people consume media, but they also show great willing to pay for that. So the Twitch model started off mainly in gamers, where people would watch a gamer play and listen to them commentating on it, and the gamer will make ad revenue from that, but they'll also just ask people to leave what they would call a subscription or a donation. If you like my session, click on the button and show me the love through your payment wallet, I suppose. And people are willing to do that. I think all of us are willing to pay for quality experiences and items and in our lives. And media owners just have to figure out what that quality experience is, and work out the right kind of value exchange.
Yeah, that's so true. And that Twitch is another one that excites me. It's probably one that your son's fairly familiar with as well, if he wants to get into the gaming. Have you heard of Ninja?
Yeah, is that the top? That's the top guy. Yeah, I heard.
I think so.
Quote marks unconfirmed. That he made between 6 and 7 million last year.
Oh wow.
Off the platform.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. It really doesn't. It would have surprised me, 5-10 years ago, or whatever. But it just seems like the norm now. But I remember watching one of them, and you could just see just money coming in, because he gets like notifications when someone subscribed or paid a fee, and I think everyone sees it as well who's watching. So that's kind of like influence, and they, like Ninja, for instance, will give a shout out and say, thanks for the $5 at so and so and so. So I think people, they want their name read out on screen as well, so they're willing to do that. It's real interesting. Again, they're just I'm sure when they started, the same with YouTubers, I'm sure when they started this hobby, they weren't actually sure that there was going to be any money involved. Like people like
Hmm.
Ninja, I think they were around before Twitch started to really start monetizing things, and the same with
Yeah.
YouTube and PewDiePie and Joe Rogan and all the big names on YouTube. I think they were around before people were fully aware of how you could make money from the
Hmm.
platforms.
Well, that's the value of getting in early, isn't it? Experimenting, getting your
Yeah,
model right, building a bit of an audience. Um,
yeah.
I took my daughter and her friend to see Miranda Sings last year at the O2 in London. So she was doing a world tour, uh, just based off a little YouTube video that idea, which is to take the mickey out of people doing YouTube videos. Um, I have to say, I really, really enjoyed the night. It was brilliant. But she's taken an online model into an offline live setting and is obviously doing really well from it. But
Okay.
the other thing I've noticed emerging is that I don't even know what the word for it is yet. I'm sure a word will emerge, but I'll just describe as scenarios. So you can now go on a cruise with John Bon Jovi, I think it is, where
Wow.
you cruise for 3 or 4 days around the Bahamas or something. And at some point during that, he joins you on the boat, and he does a little concert on this cruise ship. And depending on what level of ticket you've got, you might get to have dinner in the same room as him or at the same table as him, and it's a like a luxury meet and greet.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and I've just seen one of those recently in another, I think, was it a B2B setting? And I thought, well, that's that same model as that, very high level hangout with a celebrity of business in an intimate setting. Um,
Well, so it's kind of just like one on one, or
no,
is
no, it's
it?
a group. It's a group, so it's like a cruise ship.
Ah, right.
Maybe not
Okay.
a giant one, but for that you're maybe paying $8,000-10,000 for a 2-day
Wow.
cruise ship. In fact, the one I saw was it was what's it called? Homes and Gardens or House and Garden, the magazine, and you could go away with was one of the weather forecasters. So you go away to this event, and it's maybe 2 3 days, and you get a special tour of, I think it was something related to weather forecasting, uh, or outdoors or something. And she did a special tour, and so you paid a premium to go on this trip, which had a special interest around it, but there was a celebrity name involved. So I think that model is going to emerge more and more. It's kind of sprung out of the meet and greet. At a big concert, you can pay a massive amount of money to go backstage and meet the star after the show or before the show. Um,
Yeah.
so I think these kind of things will emerge even more.
That's kind of a decent business model from an entertainer's point of view, I guess.
Yeah.
But if I don't know if I would pay, even if I was, you know, a massive fan of a musician and they were offering 10 grand to go and meet them, I would be
Mhm.
like, no,
Yeah, but
if I'm that special to you, then
uh,
you'd meet me one on
well,
one for free.
I don't think you'll
I
be
don't
going then, will you?
know.
You'll not be meeting them, you'll need to win a competition or something. But there's lots of people have a lot of money and a great deal of passion. I mean, of course, everybody's talking about the Fire Festival, the documentary
Oh
that
god,
was on.
yeah.
I mean, that was a similar concept, wasn't it? It's go and hang out with the beautiful people. There'll be rock stars there, and they sold a lot of tickets and a lot of sponsorship. That wasn't their issue. The issue was they couldn't organize it, and the guy was just, I don't know what he had going through his head, but well, we all know the story. But the ticket sales was not the issue. There are
No,
people that
no.
will pay that money, um,
That's true, isn't it? Yeah,
and
I think
that thing about getting a shout out on a Twitch channel. You know, people are paying
people want that.
$10, $15 for that, just for that, so they can say that they did. The other interesting thing about Twitch is it's gone way beyond gaming now as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's people just, blogging about their lifestyles, and also a new thing emerging on that platform is that you can watch your favorite football game, but you can listen to your choice of commentator.
Oh
by
wow, okay.
watching on Twitch. So if you don't like Gary Lineker's annoying voice or something, you can choose to get commentated by someone else, or you can choose to be the commentator and try and gather an audience and commentate the game in the way that you want. Um, so I just think it's such an interesting time to be alive.
Yeah.
It really is.
Mm. I think we've got it kind of lucky in that. I mean, I'm 30, so it's kind of, I'm at that. I feel as though I'm in this generation where I understand where things are going, and I can pick things up and put them down again, and I can be fairly sensible with it, and not get too sucked into different things because I know how disruptive everything is and stuff. But I guess for the younger generation who are sort of growing up with this all around them,
Mm,
it's harder for them to sort of break away from it. And I guess I'm not saying that they should break away, because it's kind of like, it's evolution, I guess, isn't it? You've just got to roll with it, and you just got to go with whatever's out now. And if that's a way to sort of make money, then that's what you got to do. But
mhm.
the Fire Festival, that was some documentary. Did you watch the one on Netflix or Hulu?
I watched it on Netflix.
Because Hulu, and I think it's the platform in America, as
Mhm.
they released a documentary about it as well. But they managed to get an interview with I can't remember his name, someone McFarlane, wasn't it, or someone, the main guy who was selling it.
Oh
But
yeah.
they managed to get an interview with him, and apparently it was frowned upon because Hulu had to pay him a bunch of money and to
You
get it
see,
and
he's
stuff.
still
But
selling. He's still selling.
yeah, exactly. He's behind bars and he's still making more money than I am.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's crazy, but
yeah.
that was really interesting to watch how
Uh-huh.
someone can feed off people's sort of naivety, I guess.
Yeah,
And but I mean, if you've got the biggest stars in the world, posting about it, there's got to be some form of authenticity behind the event, I guess. Definitely. I mean,
mhm.
I would think that it was certainly real, and I wasn't gonna get a cheese sandwich
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
however many thousands it was. But
Yeah, I mean,
um
I think your point about kids and being sucked in, and what happened with the Fire Festival and quite a lot of the
mm,
other things we've talked about, you know, the thing that's got to underpin everything, and this is probably quite a good place to kind of close our chat, I suppose, is the underlying values that people have in their life are still so important, um, when you're creating content, when you're consuming content, whether you're trying to start a business, whether you're trying to grow an audience, or be a commercial success, or make your hobbies into something that can add to the quality of your life. The values that you hold are still the most important thing underlying that, and the way that you treat people, the way that you interact with people.
hmm
Um, that's what's going to make people successful or not successful, is the way that they behave as human beings. I think that's still the most important thing.
yeah, absolutely. And just be kind as well, and just um yeah, I totally agree. I've just looked at the clock, and I had no idea that we'd been chatting for 54 minutes. That's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it's been good.
It's
It's been fun.
no, it's been really good. I mean, I would love to do it again, because I've I haven't I've hardly asked you any of the stuff that I was going to. But no, it's been great to get an insight into how your mind works and what you're thinking about, and it's interesting that we share similar thoughts. And yeah, thanks for taking the time out to chat to me. I would
Oh,
love to
thanks
do
for having me.
something. I would love to do something again if you're keen, and maybe I
Anytime.
can reel off some of these questions that I had for you. But
Anytime. It's a pleasure.
great. Thank you very much,
All the
Dan. Have a
best.
lovely week. Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.